Appreciate you clicking on this review. I just got done watching the latest Kung Fu Panda movie, and with Kung Fu Panda 4, we follow Po as he must now search for the new Dragon Warrior. On this adventure, Po will tag team up with a little fox voiced by Awkwafina, while at the same time an evil foe known as the Chameleon is shapeshifting into Po's past enemies. And that's all pretty much. I got any spoilers, you guys. This will be a spoiler-free review. Skadoosh. So with the Kung Fu Panda series, this is obviously an animated film franchise that a lot of people have sentimental attachment towards. I wish I could say I was on that same level. I saw the first movie back when I was a kid when it came out, 2008. And while I did really like that first Kung Fu Panda movie, I never had an interest to watch Kung Fu Panda 2 or 3. In fact, I watched them for the first time just last week in preparation for this one. But I wasn't oblivious to the hype. People were jumping up and down when they announced Kung Fu Panda 4, and I guess it's understandable. And heck, I'll be honest, if it wasn't for the hype surrounding Kung Fu Panda 4, I wouldn't have eventually found out how good 2 and 3 are. But with that said, there were some kind of major red flags leading up to Kung Fu Panda 4. For one, we recently found out this has the lowest budget of all the Kung Fu Panda movies. Most of them were made with a budget of around $150 million. This one coming in at $85 million, which is still quite a lot for an animated movie. There was also only one trailer released for the entire marketing of the movie. The last movie that did that was Madam Web, baby. Take that for what you want. So there was a little worry in the air with people going, this dumpling might have gone bad. And having walked out and seen the movie now, look, it is for sure the weakest of the 4 movies, but I'm also willing to say there isn't a bad Kung Fu Panda movie. Let me get into the overall good stuff that I think will bring a lot of people to mostly enjoying this Kung Fu Panda entry. For one, Jack Black has not lost his touch as Po, and the movie is just as hilarious as the other entries. That's one thing that kind of surprised me when I went to go watch all the Kung Fu Panda movies in a row. I was like, dude, these are funny. These are hilarious. And so many times throughout this entry, it continued to still have that great sense of humor. And it wasn't even just with Po's character. There's a subplot in here involving his 2 dads, and the movie jumping back and forth from what they're doing and their hijinks and adventure. Oh, that was honestly the highlight of the film. I mentioned earlier this movie does have a lower budget than the other entries, and I thought that might come into play when looking at the animation, but no, it's really good here. As good as a Kung Fu Panda animated movie usually is, but the action scenes are probably some of the best we've had in the franchise. There's actually a lot of creative sequences in here, some that are just, you know, slapstick fun, Po just fighting, and there's some scenes that actually have some sauce to them. There was one scene where Po is like in black and white and smoke fighting, and you just see shadows. I was like, oh, okay. While one of the bigger negatives I'll talk about in a sec is the lack of returning characters, some of the newer voices and faces that you get to see in here were a pleasant surprise. Ke Huy Quan, who is obviously having a resurgence in Hollywood, and I'm loving it, plays an armadillo in here. Viola Davis as the Chameleon had a lot of elements I enjoyed, mostly visually. There's a lot of awesome transformation scenes throughout the movie of her going from animal to animal, and even more when she transforms into Po's old villains. And really, all in all, there is for sure enough in here for it not just to be enjoyable, but also just to be a really good time. I know people have been bagging DreamWorks a lot lately, especially for that Megamind 2 movie, but this is not a Megamind 2 situation. This is still a worthy enough Kung Fu Panda sequel. But with that in mind, I think there are going to be things in here for long-time Kung Fu Panda fans. If you were a kid who saw Kung Fu Panda in those movies and you cherished them, there might be a little bit of disappointment in some of the elements in here. Because again, while I think kids today who just maybe now are watching Kung Fu Panda or whatnot, and families, this movie's gonna do enough to just like really let them have a good time. But the movie did feel like it was lacking some of that Kung Fu Panda charm with the returning characters. The Furious 5 in here, ooh, I could hold my breath, and that's about how long they're in the movie. There's even like a scene early on where Po like is literally talking to the audience of like, just because they're not here doesn't mean it's not a great adventure. It's like, breaking the fourth wall a little bit there, Po. Another big thing longtime fans were really excited to see is Tai Lung, and yeah, him returning was awesome. His role in the film isn't as large as you would want, but he does get one awesome action scene, and you are definitely reminded why this was one of the most coolest villains in the Kung Fu Panda lineup. But at the same time, without getting into any spoilers, there are some things they do with actual Tai Lung, not Chameleon Tai Lung, the one that the villain transforms into, actual Tai Lung in here where feels a little bit out of character. There's a couple of lines he mentions to Po and says to him towards the end of the movie where I'm like, yeah, I don't think Tai Lung would ever really say that or do that. And again, maybe some of that stuff I'm mentioning is nitpicky or things that would just be fan service to someone who was a fan of these movies, but the biggest issue I had with Kung Fu Panda 4, and which brought it down a notch for me, and it being not as good as the other three, was the bond Po was having with the new character Awkwafina voices. Now, I want to get one thing out of the way. I am not an Awkwafina hater. I don't know why, but lately on the internet, anytime she gets announced to be a new animated voice character, people go crazy. And on that point, I'm willing to say her character Zen is enjoyable. There's definitely an interesting contrast between who Po is and what she is, and whether she'd be a worthy enough candidate for the Dragon Warrior. A lot of those parallels include the way Po was seen the first time he was supposed to be the Dragon Warrior and no one believed in him, and everyone was like, really, this is the candidate? And I guess that's what you're supposed to play into with this movie, is look at Awkwafina's Fox character and go, oh, come on, how she's so disrespectful. How could she be the Dragon Warrior? I mean, that's how Po was seen a lot in the first movie, a disrespectful, terrible candidate for Dragon Warrior. But the part that the movie falls flat in for me is their building bond and relationship throughout the movie. The movie hinges on them, you know, getting closer to each other, starting to trust each other, and it just never hit that emotional note for me. They do give Zen a backstory similar to, like, you know, Tai Lung's backstory or Po's backstory, kind of a tragic thing where it's like, oh, we should feel bad, and that's been a recurring thing in the Kung Fu Panda series, but it just felt really rushed and cliched, and it just didn't hit. And since the movie really hinges on this almost passing of the torch, where, you know, Po is giving up the Dragon Warrior persona to someone else, and you're just not completely vibing with that relationship, with that bond, it doesn't hit as hard once the movie ends. And really, that's just the thing that's going to be lacking the most. People are going to miss their Furious 5, those characters they grew up watching. I'm sure, of course, it was for budgetary reasons, because like I said, this one's the cheapest Kung Fu Panda movie, and I'm sure they saved a lot of money not having, you know, Jackie Chan come back, Seth Rogen come back, Angelina Jolie come back as Tigress. Like, those are some expensive people. And even thinking about it, I don't know where the Furious 5 would have exactly fit into this movie, but that was the magic of the past three. They always fit into the story somehow, and the lack of it might disappoint longtime fans. And again, that's me just saying longtime fans. This is still a pretty great and super enjoyable movie for, you know, kids who aren't thinking about that, who don't hold the Kung Fu Panda lore and characters so deep in their hearts. And I know some of you are like, Chris, you literally just watched the movies last week. How could you call yourself? I'm not saying I'm a hardcore fan. I'm just saying all the negative reactions I've seen from people are the ones who grew up with the movie and were lacking some of that old Kung Fu Panda charm. But overall, with Kung Fu Panda 4, I'm gonna give action 3.5 stars. I think this might be some of the best action done in the Kung Fu Panda franchise. A lot of great choreographed moments with the Tai Lung fight scene. There's some great Po fight scenes in this black smoky room. Comedy in the movie, I'm gonna give it 4 stars. I find the Kung Fu Panda humor so hilarious. I know it might not be everybody's thing, but when you can find family-friendly sense of humor very enjoyable throughout the movie, that's kind of rare. Sometimes it's always very cartoonish and just made for kids, but like this was pretty funny. Drama in the movie, I'm gonna give it 3 stars. The story was suitable enough. I don't think the story in here was the strongest, but it's still nice enough. Horror in the movie, I'll give half a star to, and that's mainly for the gnarly transformation scenes that the chameleon goes through. That might frighten some kids. And suspense the movie, I'm gonna give it 2.5 stars. It's a Kung Fu Panda movie. It's pretty obvious and predictable where it's headed by the end. I think there was really only like one twist in the film, and I didn't see it coming, but also I was like, oh, that's kind of cool that they just threw that in there. Casual fans into the Kung Fu Panda world, I'm gonna give it an A+. Cinephiles, I'm gonna give it a B+. And critically, I'm going to give it a B+. Although I mentioned this is probably the weakest entry in the Kung Fu Panda series, it's still a good enough entry in the series to watch in theaters. But again, guys, that's just my opinion on the movie. Like I said, if you're a die-hard, long-time Kung Fu Panda fan, just kind of tame your expectation for the returning characters and development story, specifically with Po. Just go in wanting to laugh, see some cool action scenes, and hang out with Po one more time. I think you'll enjoy your time. Let me know your guys' opinion if you saw the movie. Don't forget to like, subscribe, follow me on Twitter at 3C Films or on TikTok at 3C Films. But as always, I'm Chris. Take care.